Good evening. I'm Terry Yoffe, and welcome to Coach World TV. Tonight is my guest. I have actually someone really special, Ann Fry. Hi,
Thank
Ann.
you. Hi, Terry.
Hi. Ann and I have go back a little bit of a ways,
A few
and
years.
finally our paths crossed, and I said, you got to be on Coach World TV, and here we are.
Yeah, and I'm happy to be here.
Oh, me too.
really
Ann
great.
is a transition and executive coach. She was an early graduate of Coach U, and she gave up her therapy practice to coach and to speak. She does a lot of speaking engagements. So, Ann,
Yes.
tell me about the transition from a therapy practice to a coaching practice. Not that they're all that different.
Right. It was really kind of a no-brainer because this was the mid-90s and managed care was coming down the pike. And I began to realize that it would be harder to make a living as a therapist because you'd have to call for permission, you'd have to lower your rates. It was becoming impractical, and it was like insurance companies were working their way into your practice and you didn't have as much control anymore. And I didn't like that. And I learned about coaching and I thought this is a great way to be able to work with people without the intrusion of insurance companies telling me how often I could see someone, when I couldn't see them. And also, on the funny side, I'd been a therapist for a long time and I was sort of tired of people's problems. It was like there were times when I wanted to say, wait a minute, let me tell you about my life. And so it was a great transition for me.
That's really interesting. Just piggybacking on that a little bit,
Yeah.
I spent many years in therapy.
Uh-huh.
And when I thought about what was my next career after my sales career, I thought I'd go back to school and become a therapist.
Yeah, there you go.
And it was just too many years of going back to school, and I thought, what's a parallel path? So I went into coaching.
Yeah, it's a really great way to do it.
And I've heard a lot of therapists want to get into coaching.
They do. Well, I think one of the reasons is a practical one. They get paid up front. They get paid up front, and they don't have to, they don't have to deal with the whole insurance thing. But I think the other thing about it is that, and by being a recipient, as all good therapists have been in therapy too.
We hope.
Yeah, well, some of them needed it and didn't, but the truth of the matter is therapy is so focused on the past.
Right.
And coaching is so focused on the present and what's next.
Right.
And so you don't have to get into the intricacies of what the problems are. You just help people move forward. And I think that's much more compelling, at least it has been for me, to be able to see that kind of progress with people.
So there's a definite difference between therapy and coaching.
I think so.
And you were a therapist for how long?
Oh, probably 25 years.
Okay.
a long
You've
time.
been coaching for
15.
Can you say?
And there were other jobs in between.
Okay, but can you say which you prefer?
Yeah, I love coaching. I mean, I'm a very happy person because I love speaking in front of audiences and training, and I love coaching.
Okay.
So when I get up in the morning, I'm happy.
Great. So you also do speaking engagements.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about
That.
about that.
The family joke was my mother used to say, well, Anne came out of the womb talking. I've never. So when we talk about having an interview, I don't have any problem talking because I'm always talking. I taught for a long time. I taught in public school. I taught in university.
Okay.
So it's been comfortable for me to be in front of audiences. And then I started doing some workshops, and I've been in the National Speakers Association now for I think 17 years.
Wow.
So it's really even for me, coaching and speaking, and I do both. And I would say that my income is about half and half.
So when you get up and speak, what your favorite topics and subject matter?
Yeah, it's evolved.
Uh-huh.
It's evolved over the years. I mean, most people know that what I do now and have for the past few years is I speak on the whole umbrella of reinvention. And what does that mean?
Right.
I started out speaking about humor in the workplace. I had a company called Humor University, which was all about fun solutions for serious problems. And I would go into companies and I would help them learn how to lighten up. And I wrote a book about the value of humor in the workplace and la-di-da. And then people started saying, Well, that's a really great topic, but if we're going to use our money for training, we'd rather do computer training or something that seemed more practical.
Oh, interesting.
And I realized that what I was doing with that humor was all about helping companies to create a more effective culture, a company culture. And so it's morphed into this whole thing about how do you regenerate, how do you reinvent a company culture. And that means developing better leaders, coaching leaders, doing training around what does it take to change in a positive way, not get stuck in the status quo. And as we get into this conversation, you know, somebody can count on me for change because I've done a lot of reinventing and changing in my own life. So at least I'm someone who walks the walk and talks the talk.
Right. So, I always believe that until you transform yourself, you can't transform a company. You has to come from
It's true.
the top to go through transformation or reinvention or
Whatever you
whatever. And I think that in today's ever challenging, ever changing business landscape, one has to always be changing or reinventing, repositioning, you know, repurposing is your word. Who they are and what their game plan is.
It's true.
Talk us a little bit about that.
I did a training about 2 weeks ago with a company in New Jersey. It was about 50 mid-level managers, and there's a lot of change coming into their organization. They've acquired a couple of other companies, so they're taking 3 different cultures and trying to blend them.
Wow.
Lots of change. Now, they only hired me so far to come in and do one workshop, and they loved the idea of the regeneration process, how to, you know, regenerate, which is all about growing newly and starting over or trying new things. But then I put the subtitle as embracing change. And so we started talking about change from the personal side. Like I had them in small groups talk about a time that you made a very positive change and what was the outcome of that. And when it was a maybe challenging change, how did you choose to do that? What did you do, and who was there to support you? And I have a lot of steps that I took them through so that they could look personally at change, like you said, because if you're not willing to look at yourself first, then how are you going to take that into your company and say, oh, there are things that need to be done here? You're going to be someone who's oppositional to change and not willing to go with it.
And you would think today, with, as I said, everything going on, change is inevitable for everybody, yet people resist it.
Yeah.
A lot of people resist. They want things the way they are. They want status quo. But there's nothing in the world today that is status quo.
Well, and it's boring. I mean, the other side of the thing is oftentimes status quo is very boring. I say to people, okay, so when you get up in the morning and you drive to work, do you take the same route every day? Now, we live in New York where we don't use cars particularly, but for most people, you know, do you get up and drive the same way to work? And many people say, yeah, I get up at the same time, I eat the same thing for breakfast, I get in my car, I make the same stop at the same Starbucks every morning, you know, and it's the same.
Into a routine. I don't want to use the word rut, but routine, and I don't know, there's something to be said. I like structure to some extent.
Yeah.
I'm always willing to push the envelope.
Right.
But, you know, I go to the same diner, and I always order
the same thing.
salad.
I know, I've been with you. I've been with you
and
there.
They know it. The minute I sit down, they know.
They know it's a bring. I went with Terry. I went to that diner with you, and he came over and he said, "Do you want the same?"
I know. There you go.
Well, but there's a difference. There's a difference between some of those habits that are not harmful and some of the habits that really are keeping you stuck. And so for a company to be able to change, if people are not willing to, you know, think outside the proverbial box, I call it color outside the lines. When I started a presentation about that, I do a whole big scribble about when I entered a coloring contest and how I used to, you know, try to stay inside the lines and be perfect, and how I don't do that anymore. You know, it's like I color way outside the lines and take a lot more risk because I don't want to be bored. I don't want to be bored, and I don't want to be stuck. And I know that the people who work with me really like that.
Right. Well, there's something comfortable about being,
Of course.
I don't want to use the word stuck. They don't see it as stuck, but
Same.
Yeah.
Being kind of the same. You know,
Right,
don't rock the
right,
boat, right?
right,
Don't
right.
rock the boat. But if you think of it, if we go back to the workplace for a minute, if you
Sure.
think about it, if you've got a company that's merged with two other companies, and what's going on with them is they've got one system over here, one system over here, and another system over here. That means their customers are not very happy. They need to merge this and create one new system to encompass all of it. That's going to mean that people that have been there for a long time are going to have to learn new skills, they're going to have to give up things. And if they're not willing to do some simple changes within themselves, how are they going to move that company forward? Halfway through the training, I'll not say a word, we'll be going through the training, and then about halfway through I say, okay, right now I want everybody to pick up all your stuff and move from where you're sitting and find a new table to sit at. And you should hear the grumbling sometimes. I don't want to move. Why is she making me do that? And it's, if you can't deal with a simple thing, and I say, look at your grumbling. If you're grumbling about something that simple, how's it going to work for you to make changes where it's really important?
And I think when there's a lot of companies merging, there's different cultures.
Oh, yeah.
And that becomes a slippery slope for people that are used to one culture, and now they're moving into, you know,
Right.
a couple of cultures are kind of meshing together.
Right.
And then who knows what the culture, you know, they'll
Right.
stir it up in a pot,
Right.
and then they'll come out with a new culture.
Yeah. And I mean, are they a small company where maybe people had offices, or are they a larger company where people sit in cubes? And are they siloed, or do they actually work together in teams? I mean, very different dynamics to look at. So I think when we were talking earlier, you said, what's my sweet spot?
Yeah,
And
right, exactly.
one of my sweet spots is really getting to the point where I can work with a team over time, coaching their management and upper level C-level people into how do we turn this around? How do we create great leaders who really encourage people to be their best and don't do, and I distinguish a lot, and I teach this in my coaching class too, I distinguish a lot between managers and leaders because there's quite a distinction there.
And so what is the distinction, just out of curiosity?
So and you need both of them. So I'm not saying one is really any lesser, but managers, oftentimes their function is to be like operations, make sure things happen. People fill out their timesheets, people put in their, you know, their budgetary needs, people meet their deadlines, da 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 da. Okay, so you need someone to keep you on the straight and narrow to do those things. Leaders have a much larger role. They have the vision, the mission, the purpose. They're the ones who try to pull their people forward into what can we be, what can we have. And so the leaders can be really big and all over the place, right, with these big, gigantic expectations. And the managers keep the business functioning. But if the managers don't hold the vision, so you really need that combination of both.
Right.
And in reading a lot of the literature about that, that's the clearest distinction, I think.
You know, yeah, and there is a distinction, and yet when you look at the managers, in their own little way, they're leaders.
They are.
You know, so
For their groups.
Right, for their groups. So
As long as they embrace that and they don't abuse it, because sometimes they don't really know how to do it, so they tend to sound like they're disciplinarians and you didn't get this done in time, and they don't get that that's not the best way to bring people forward. So, you know, when I can work with a team at different levels, I do assessments with them, I do team building, and I do whatever I can to pull them together. And it's great when it trickles down from the top, but it doesn't always. Sometimes it comes from a team and then we move our way up. And I've been fortunate enough to work with a few teams. I've never worked with a large company where we actually got up all the way up to the C-suite where we could take them through it.
Right.
But maybe someday.